Good morning, welcome to the Morning Coffee Show. I'm Prince Hakeem.
I'm Amanda Love.
And today we have a sensitive topic, but it's a very important topic we want to talk about. Before we get into it, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in last week. This is the second show of the new year. So yeah, of course we had to start off a little light, but now we have to get into something that's really important to the community. I think to everyone really. If you have watched this, it's been about a few months now.
It came out in May of 2019, the series When They See Us, in reference to the Central Park jogger case.
Yeah, so the Central Park was at 5. So
yes.
I know we're kind of late talking about it, but this conversation shouldn't diminish anyway. It shouldn't go away.
No, it shouldn't go away. And I think what I found that when I watched it, a lot of people, especially younger people, aren't even familiar with the case.
Right.
So a little bit of background is in April of 1989, there were people assaulted. There was a group of kids, I want to say they said 30 to 40 kids in Central Park running around, playing. I guess they assaulted, robbed, whatever, just harassing people, being obnoxious teenagers. And Trisha Miley was attacked, beaten, raped, and left in the woods in the north part of Central Park. And she was hospitalized, unconscious, and really had no recollection of details of the beating and the rape. Could not remember how many, or if there were many or one initially when she was questioned about that incident. And the state of New York ended up indicting 5 children for that crime.
Yeah. So if you watched the show, I don't know if you felt the same way I did. I know when we talked about it, I get a little emotional about it because I have a son, and he's around the age of one of the youngest kids, and I couldn't imagine what they were going through. The crazy part is this happens quite often. Like, this happens almost every day. It was a witch hunt that they were out here looking for just someone or some form of people to take the drop for it. And it was a disjustice. And a big part of that really got me is that Donald Trump was really behind it, like pushing for conviction with these young men. And skip ahead, years later, he's now the president of the United States. Kind of tells you where we are.
And what our country as a people has found like to be acceptable. And I'm not even one for like holding something against somebody for an extended amount of time. Like, people definitely have the opportunity to show change and to show improvement, but I don't think when we're talking about him, I don't think he's shown anything that proves there has been any kind of change or improvement in his character.
Yeah.
Up until this point. But I think a big part of that is like, I feel bad even talking about him because I feel like I don't want to even make this about him.
No, it's not about him, but he had a part to play.
He definitely pushed the agenda, and I think that it shows where our country has gone in terms of how because a large part of the reasoning in his election was people were thinking about money and business and how that could benefit our economy, as opposed to who he is as a man.
Yeah. It's not about Donald Trump. The only reason I brought him up, obviously, is because he's a huge figurehead, and he, I think, put an award out or something like that. It was a reward out, and he was really behind them getting the death penalty. Like, he was so hard up on the situation where he was not even close to it. Like, he doesn't know the woman. He
basically had
no attachment to the situation.
Case at all. He just had something to say.
And people allowed that dangerous conversation to happen with him because he has power.
And he even suggested at one point the death penalty.
Yeah.
I mean, and God forbid,
the children.
God forbid somebody would have like taken heed to that and said, sure, and ran with that, because he's, 1, they're kids, and 2, totally innocent.
Yeah.
So a little more background, just so people are kind of familiar. They were indicted on charges of assault, robbery, sexual abuse, attempted murder. There were 5 defendants in the case, and their DNA did not match anything. There was DNA collected at the scene. None of them had DNA matching. There was basically nothing that tied, outside of them being in the park that night with friends, running around, doing whatever. There was absolutely nothing that tied these kids to that woman or to this case. There was no evidence that proved otherwise. The 5 of them received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. 4 juvenile defendants served 6 to 7 years each. And the 16-year-old Corey Wise was tried and sentenced as an adult and served 13 years in adult prison starting at the age of 16. It was heart-wrenching.
Yeah. If I remember it well, Corey wasn't even there. I think Corey went to the police station with his friend to just be there as support, because he said, I can't leave you.
They
by
weren't
yourself.
even, if you, especially if you watch the series,
Yeah.
they weren't even looking to question him.
No.
They
he
were
wasn't.
looking to question his friend,
Yeah.
and he was there as kind of support.
Yeah.
You know, like didn't want him to go by himself. He was the older of the two. And you get the vibe when you're watching it that he was a protector
Yeah.
by nature. And even if you watch, like I follow them on social media now. I have supported a lot of their, like the clothing line and stuff like that. And if you look at who he is now, just in dealing with them, he has that vibe. Like he's very down to earth, and he's like a typical New York guy. Like he's very hard, and he's not a huge like talker when they do interviews and stuff.
Yeah.
He's friendly, but he's just like, this is just me. Like he's not trying to put on anything. And not saying that any of the other guys are, but that's just him. He is literally just who he is.
Yeah.
And he was being a friend.
Yeah. It's unnerving to know that these things happen so often, and the reason that this got so much like press on it, because where it happened, who got involved. But you got to think, even in the past, like Emmett Till, a young man that got murdered, you know, from lies from a woman, you know, and it's sad to say, a woman of, you know, the Caucasian race. Like when you say, hey, these people, this person did this to me, that holds more weight than the facts or the truth. And the fact these young men's lives was taken away from them, you know, 13 years at the age of 16, your life, I'm not saying it's done, but you pretty much you start from zero.
I mean, you're definitely institutionalized.
Yeah.
And there is some coverage about Corey Wise and his mental health prior to going into prison.
Yeah.
So, and he spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. He spent a lot of time being abused, there's not even a word, like I could call it being bullied or attacked or whatever, but it doesn't even come close to what it is and what was depicted in the series and in the movies and whatever. It doesn't even come close.
The worst thing you can do is go into jail, prison with the tag of a rapist on you, like, or a child molester. Like, those are the worst things to go to jail for. At the age of 16, you're going into a jail with grown men as a rapist.
I hate to say it, grown men in Rikers Island. Like, that's not
Nah.
It was literally heart-wrenching during the trial. And then I don't even want to go to the trial yet. As I was watching, and this was the part I really wanted to like hone in on. As I was watching the way, and I've read a little bit about it, the way they did the interviews in the beginning. So they made 20-something arrests.
Right.
When they're interviewing children, parents aren't there. Parents are going in and out. Raymond Santana, I think his grandmother barely spoke English. Like, they literally did things in a total illegal fashion.
Right.
And abused their power as police officers. And the prosecutor, I mean, she should be ashamed of herself at this point. When the show came out in May of last year, by June, I believe that she resigned. And I want to say,
You know,
she was teaching at Columbia Law School and she resigned.
Yes, I remember that. She should have done it way sooner than that.
Well, I think somebody has to point the finger, right?
But the thing is,
she had to be shamed instead of just being personally ashamed of herself for what she had done.
Right. It's very unnerving to know that people are so convicted, even when it's totally false. Like when somebody is so hard up on they want to be right, they'll do something as dangerous as sticking to a lie. And
even when
for
you
years,
even when you see that it's obvious.
You see it obvious. And to your point, how are you interrogating children? First of all, the case should have got thrown out. At that point, it should have got thrown out. But when you're dealing with young men that come in from the background they came from, unfortunately, getting proper legal counsel and things like that probably wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And then they're not knowing their rights. The young man that his dad told him just to go ahead and go along with it, so he go home. That's but that happens every day. Like you got parents that are just concerned about their children coming home. They do whatever it takes just to come home, and we'll figure it out later. Mm-hmm. Not getting the proper advice is heart wrenching. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like.
And for the record, we didn't even say their names.
No, we didn't say their names. I didn't
so it was Corey Wise was the oldest. That was a 16-year-old. You had Corey Wise, Kevin Richardson, Raymond Santana, Antron McCray, and Yusef Salam were the Central Park Five. I hate that term even. Yeah. Because I feel like somebody has like coined their thing, and it's literally not their thing.
Well, it's what they tied to. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, it is what it is, and they do have names. I seen the shirt. I like the shirt because it has all their names on it.
I have the hoodie.
You have the hoodie
and the T-shirt.
Yeah.
And I bought. So I'm gonna clarify. I bought it from Park Madison, which is Raymond Santana's line. Mm. I wanted to make sure that I supported appropriately because everybody makes those T-shirts now.
Yeah.
But it is in 2002, Mateus Reyes, which is actually the person who committed the crime, confessed totally.
And him and Corey met in jail.
Yes, they were locked up together.
Yeah, and they had beef.
And they were locked up together 2 separate times. And they did have a beef at one point in time. When they were released, they had a lawsuit against the city and won $41 million.
Not enough. It's not enough money.
I hate that people look at that and go, oh, well, they got released and they got $41 million. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It is heartbreaking that somebody thinks $40 million split against 5 people is actually something to brag about.
$40 million for
you can't get back
the time you spent.
You can't get back what you took.
Yeah.
Like you can't get back the time, you can't get back the mental health.
Yeah.
You can't get back the abuse. You can't get back anything that these men had to go through, had to endure because of what was done to them.
Yeah.
I mean, when I watched that interview, at the end of When They See Us, and please watch it if you haven't watched it already, because even just showing the support and educating yourself on the process, and of course, we're years later, maybe people are more familiar with legal rights and things like that, so it probably wouldn't happen as severely now as it did then, but it happens every day.
Every day.
Like people are unjustly accused and put in prison or put in jail for things that they didn't do.
I just want to say our system is broke. The whole fucking system is broke. And unfortunately, and I don't mind even saying this out loud, it's not even designed for us. Nowhere in there do they have justice does not equate with who we are. And when I say that, I'm talking black and brown people. It is nowhere in there that it says that it's justice for you. Justice is blind, but only for certain people. And it's old. You gotta think, a lot of these laws were
Everything was
designed.
developed and designed in a time where we had no rights.
We had no rights. Not only that we didn't have any rights, we weren't even looked at as humans. So to even say that, oh no, this applies to you, you're gonna have to redo the whole thing, and they're not gonna do that. Why? Because that can open up a can of worms. Anytime you do revisions and addendums and things like that, then you got people that want to put their input in it. Now that can make it better or it can make it worse. But I just want to let you know, it's not fair, it's not designed for us, and it goes to show with this case how blatant they use the law against people that it's not designed for anyway. Children, women, men, doesn't really matter. I watched this show last night called Monsters and Men. I don't know if you heard of it, but it's about a black cop that ended up finding himself in a weird position because he noticed it was like almost like a Freddie Gray situation. It was in New York, and a young man was out in front of the store. The cops rolled up on him. He was selling like cigarettes or something like that, and they ended up shooting him. But another young man caught on camera. Now, what happened after that, obviously people was in an uproar and it was really upset and trying to get justice for this guy. And the young man that had the tape was a young Hispanic guy, and he had to choose if he's going to release the footage of his friend being murdered by the police or keep it to himself and not get in more trouble, because he already had a felony on his record. And he knew if he did something, they were going to come after him. And exactly what happened. They told him, hey, don't start any trouble. You know, everything will be fine. He releases the tape. They find that these people were guilty of this murder of this young man. And it's just a downward spiral of just people making decisions to either speak up or not to speak up. And it goes to show you, like, when it's law enforcement that has the power to make a decision if you live or die, or did you go home or you go to jail, I think that everyone should have check and balances. Somebody should be coming in there making sure that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. I don't really agree with the body cams because those things can be shut off. What you gonna do, get a smack on the hand for saying, you know, I turned my camera off by accident? But what I'm saying, that's not with this particular case that we're talking about, but it just goes to show the law is not designed for us, and these young men had some injustice done to them, and $40 million, even if you gave each one of them $40 million, would not cover what they've been through. Publicly humiliated. Like I said, when you walk around with the stigma of a rapist.
Not to mention public humiliation for them, their families.
Yes. People thinking that you are a rapist, even though you're not.
Their parents, like
right.
What you have to go through to even, I mean, these kids served time in basically baby jail.
Yep.
And got out, and with the exception of Corey, got out and had to go back to like living a regular life.
Yep. It was hard.
And half the time, it's another show, but let's not forget how many hurdles convicted felons have to jump through to just get a job and provide for a family. So now not only are you a convicted felon trying to survive, but you're a convicted felon trying to survive that is like all over the place on this crazy case that's been publicized in the most gruesome way.
Yeah.
And that's the title you have over your head. Because that's who you are every time somebody looks at you, every time somebody sees your name.
Trying to have meaningful relationships with people and getting jobs, I have to explain it to people. And no matter how much you tell somebody that you didn't do it, the fact that you did time for it says you did it. And even to this day, you know, I saw an interview with them. They said, look, I'm still dealing with it. Like, you
Of
know,
course.
they got it expunged or whatever, but you're still dealing with the stigma of,
There are
it's a
so,
possibility you could have did it. So we're
There-
just going to sit with, you could possibly be a rapist.
there are points in that mini series where me personally, I mean, everybody's gonna pick up their piece and go like, wow. The whole episode depicting Corey's experience, because that is something separate, was there were points where I literally had to close my eyes because I was like so ashamed of just being human, because I couldn't believe that some people could treat a human being that way. And there were points where, like, for instance, when Ray got out, he went home to his father, and at this point his father has a girlfriend and whatever, and they allow him to move in. She always treats him kind of cold. And you know, it was a hard thing to do. He getting back to work, just getting back to being normal. And he had a few convictions after that, but he was just trying to get a life back, any kind of life.
Yep.
At one point they're arguing and she says, "You're a fucking rapist."
Yep.
And he's like, you could tell, like, even in the show, that hit him hard there. And I can't imagine what it would be like to live in a house with somebody who you're looking at every day and you know that's what they think of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know you didn't do it.
Yeah, which means they don't believe you. And like I said, it's always going to be one of those moments that's like, you could have. I wasn't there, so it's a possibility that, I mean, I'll give you 89%, but you know, there's a possibility you just showed some signs just
But
because
then
you haven't.
this other person that completely admitted the
Right.
whole thing and
Doesn't
said,
matter.
like, yes, I was there, I did it, this is how. He even, when Mateus Reyes confessed to that crime, he even gave details
Yes.
that
Only he would have known.
Yeah, only he would have known. Like, nobody else knew. When you look at even the clips of the original documentation that they have from these boys, you could tell they are children. They have no idea what the hell's going on. They are stuttering, their mannerisms, their character, like the things that they're doing in those moments, you could tell that they are just children who are absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
Like, they are scared out of their mind.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to, this little piece, after the miniseries was released last year, of course, Linda Fairstein, who was the lead of she was in charge of the sex crimes division in the district attorney's office. At the time that it was released, she was pretty much in the miniseries and in general in the case, she was pretty much the driving force behind the prosecution team. She blatantly ignored evidence that validated these children were not what she was looking for. So it was very obvious that she was just like, nope, I'm completely gonna ignore that. And she said herself that the miniseries was so full of distortions and falsehood as to be an outright fabrication. It is so sad that even after, instead of swallowing your pride at that point and admitting, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
I was
That's
kind
too
of,
much though. That's too much.
yeah, that I was kind of, maybe I was blinded by whatever's going on, or maybe I was so gung-ho, or maybe to me, it did add up because all these kids were running around and doing whatever. Like, even coming out and saying I made a mistake was too much for her.
Yeah.
And still to this day, they have been awarded that $41 million. Then they had another case through the state that they got awarded $3.9 million. I don't even know what you're splitting $3 million for, $4 million for. Like, what are you doing? But she has clearly, like, kind of just disappeared into this oblivion. And not to say, like I said earlier with Donald Trump, it's like you don't want to highlight any of these people that did all the wrong things. But there's a clear depiction that that system is broken. Because
Right.
for all these people to be involved and this to have gone the way it had for so long is devastating.
Yeah.
And it's sad because, I mean, you're raising a son and I'm raising a daughter, and
It can happen.
it's
to her.
heartbreaking to think that
Yeah.
that is literally what our children have to grow up in, because that's the world we live in.
It's really sad. When you got people, like I said, have a hard on for just being right. I always tell people, don't seek to be right. Just look for the facts. If you're wrong, you're wrong. You're not always going to be right. I understand if your job is to be, on top of your game, always be number one. People will do whatever it takes to win. And then you also have people in the air like, we need to close this now. Like, so I don't care what you got to do. I don't care who you got to throw underneath the bus. We got to close this now. And there are some really ratchet people, man, like some really bad people out there. And one of the questions I always ask myself when I watch this show, so what if it was a group of white kids that was running in the park that night, playing around?
Oh, stop.
Like, would we be even having this conversation?
No, of course
Like,
not.
would that even be a because you gotta think back when that Lacoste team raped that girl, allegedly raped that girl. There was evidence there, and they covered it up. So you had evidence. I think you need somebody who confessed, and it just kind of got. Nobody wanted the death penalty for that.
And you see over time, because this case, I mean, we're talking about 1989. Okay, that was back in the day. Like they don't nearly have back then like the social media coverage, and that case was all over the place.
Yeah.
I was a kid and I knew about that case.
Yeah.
Like it was literally everywhere. For that case to have gotten the coverage it did, and not to say like a rape is a small thing, but to have gotten the coverage they got in comparison to other cases that should have gotten the same, if not more coverage, is unreal.
Yeah.
It's and obviously everything can't be on the news all at one time.
Yeah.
But I find it ironic how many times somebody has to say this is clearly unjust, and it still happens every day.
When you're picking and choosing what you want to put on the TV is very interesting to me. You control the narrative. So if you want everyone to think that black and brown people are monsters and rapists and drug dealers and all these other things, and then that's what you show. You don't show the other things. You don't show the other side that everyone can do these things. It's not about your pigmentation. It's all about the character of the person. And the thing that scares me more than anything is that you gotta have certain conversations with your kids now before they leave the house. How to interact with the police, how to carry themselves, and who to talk to and who not to talk to. Just being nice to someone can turn into another thing. You can look at a female and say, hey, how you doing? Good afternoon. Hold the door open. Just because they have these hang-ups or what the news has been showing them for so long, they automatically going to jump to a conclusion that you're trying to do something to hurt them. That's the hard part for me, because being a black male in America, it's already difficult dealing with certain things. But then when you have to be conscious of how you talk, where you go, what you do, those things that get a little, it's extra. And it shows with this particular case where they were just being kids. You don't even want to send your kids outside to go play. Now, granted, I would say maybe they shouldn't be in the park that late at night playing around. But let's just leave the time of day out. It was in the park just being kids.
And right is right and wrong is wrong. Like
Right.
if my daughter does something that requires consequence, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But have it be something that requires consequence, and have it be a fact. Like
The truth.
I want to know that she did something, and I want proof that she did it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like we said earlier, at that point, people didn't have the knowledge or understanding of the law, what was allowed to be done, what wasn't. You know, how could you question somebody, the length of time you could question somebody. I mean, we're talking about children that were questioned for hours.
Yeah.
Like over a day.
Yeah.
Like, and overnight.
Yeah.
I mean, so they're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Their families are exhausted
Mm-hmm.
or working.
Mm-hmm.
I think the worst, like in watching them, how they were like hitting them.
Mm-hmm.
They were, I mean, literally, it's torture.
It's kids.
It was torture. They were hitting
kids.
them. They were scaring them. They were twisting their words. They didn't feed them. And then you see this next part where they're actually locked up all in the same room, except for Corey. And they kind of start, no, I think Corey is there. They kind of start admitting to each other
They was telling on each other.
that, like,
But they
I
lied
lied.
on you. Yeah, I lied on you. I lied on you too.
And I, like, watching that moment, I was like, wow. Like, in that moment, a child that probably lies all the time, even a kid in that moment realized how important it was to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I had a whole newfound respect for Corey when I watched his parole hearings.
Because Corey didn't break.
Not at all.
He said, "I didn't do it."
He was not about that. He was like, I am not about to, like, admit to something I didn't do. And I respected it more because I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were doing the whole 2020 talk, like, oh, this is how this year is gonna be, and blah 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 blah. And you know, I was just kind of like, there is so much more to the character of a person than what they do. You know, I could say all day, I'm not gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do that. That doesn't make me that person. You know, if I choose not to lie with you, I could still be a liar, just not lying to you. You know, if I choose not to be a person who beats people up, you know, and I don't hit you, I could still beat up somebody else. You know, like, it doesn't make you not an abuser, it just makes you not an abuser to that person. And I admired the fact that Corey stayed there and just said, that's not who I am.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna admit to something I'm not.
Yeah.
And he didn't care about the repercussions. He basically just said at one point, he literally said, I'm gonna just have to ride it out. And as heart-wrenching as it was, I don't know how many people have that level of conviction and character within themselves.
Very few. Very few. If you had the opportunity to go home,
That's what I'm saying.
the only thing you
Like,
had to do is say,
if
okay,
all
I
you
did
had
it,
to
right?
do was go in there and admit to raping this woman years later and saying, like, I'm rehabilitated, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
I mean, that would be the easiest response. And he would not budge.
Yeah, I saw an interview where someone said, Corey, no one would have blamed you if you did. Just say you did it, right? Just to go home. And you can even tell in his face, like, I think it's his upbringing, because it's something I tell my son too. If you didn't do something, don't lay claim to it. Don't put your name on it. Don't raise your hands for it. And I can tell with him, he's like, I don't understand. How can I say I did something that I didn't do? And that shows character. And if it was right or wrong, I'm not going to lay claim to something that wasn't me. So even if it was something that was amazing that happened, and they say, "Hey man, take credit for that," he's not going to do it. And
But it shows the character.
It shows the character of the person.
Of that person. It shows the character of that person. And for all of them, you know, I admired their honesty in what they were doing, because the very end of that, if you watch the end of the series, all the way at the end, the very last episode is interviews with the actor, all the actors, and then all of the real guys. And watching them discuss their journey and the things that they've experienced and how they see each other, because prior to this moment, they didn't even know each other.
Yeah.
But they had to, with the exception of Corey, had to share in this journey together.
Yeah.
Because the 4 boys, they all went to juvenile facilities, but they all went at the same time. So at least they had, I don't even know if I would call it support, but it was support because you weren't alone. And for children, that's something.
Yeah.
For children, I mean, that means the world, because their world is about support and encouragement and love. So at least they were together and they had that in common, as horrible as it was. For Corey, thinking about who I was at 16, the level of maturity and life experience I had, and he's a man of few words in an interview, but I can't imagine what his state of mind was.
Yeah.
And the actor, I can't remember his name off the top of my head right now.
Yeah, he did an amazing job.
Oh my God.
See,
I couldn't.
He won a Grammy for that, right?
He won an Emmy.
Emmy
He
for
did one. He won an Emmy for it. But I couldn't. That episode was so crazy for me because all I was thinking about the entire time was, who was I when I was 16? Who were you when you were 16?
Yeah. And I get what you're saying. I think with Corey, he was more of a man at 16 than most 16-year-old.
Well, I will
kids
say,
were.
living in New York, and I was in New York when I was young. Living in New York at that time, and at that time, that's when I was living in New York, it was a different world. But that's the New York that I remember as a kid. It was common for kids to be outside, socializing, running around the neighborhood, playing outside. That's what we did. I mean, we didn't have computers, we didn't have, phones, we didn't have all this other stuff that we have now.
Right.
But kids at, 15, you were getting on the subway by yourself and going wherever, or catching a cab, or, whatever. The level of maturity and responsibility, personal responsibility, was very different than the world we live in right now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure children there now, probably same kind of thing. But we're in Virginia and it's just not like that here.
Yeah.
But just seeing what he was going through and seeing what he was dealing with, and not to mention his mental state at the time, and what he was able to comprehend. Because I remember at one point when they were talking about his statement, he didn't even write it.
Yeah, he said he can't really read that well.
So how you got a statement signed by somebody who can't read that well? That's an automatic, like, okay, well, I gotta go, because he don't even know what he's signing.
Right.
It was, and what you lose in that time frame. Not just time, but you're talking about, like, he lost his brother. You're losing family. Your family is changing. The life is changing.
Yeah.
Time is changing.
Yeah.
And you're losing all of that. 41 million doesn't cover it.
Doesn't cover
And
it.
they have still, till this day, here we are, 2020, they still till this day have not received an apology. There has been no formal statement, apology, nothing from anyone.
They won't. Because when you apologize, it does a couple things. It shows the flaw. It shows that you were wrong. It shows that you could have did something different, but you didn't. Right? And it's not that you're apologizing because it was a situation where it was undeniable on either ends. It's completely, hey, I'm apologizing because we ignored the facts. We ignored the evidence. We ignored the fact that we did not do the right thing when it came to.
But saying that would show a complete
they have to
oversight.
They have to go back and reinvestigate other cases at that point. Once you say I made a mistake, bing, everyone's going to be like, well, you need to review this one, you need to review this one, and this one, and this one. Why? Because this is very similar.
Well, I'm sure
to
that that's happening at this point.
Absolutely.
And these guys, you know, if you go searching now, these guys have done so much in the community for innocence type projects, things in reference to just building up the community, becoming entrepreneurs. I mean, they've done a lot in the short amount of time that they've been out. And granted, the case has gotten so much coverage that it made it possible for them to kind of monopolize on that.
Yeah.
But it's no matter how much attention or a pat on the back or, you know, recognition you get for your struggle, it doesn't take away, it doesn't nearly resolve what happened and how it happened. I looked at Antron McCray, and he was the one that went in with his parents. That's the one you were talking about with his father. And his father passed away. And I would say out of the 5 of them, he mentally has suffered. That still shows up so much more. I wouldn't say he's suffering more because I don't think there's any comparison. But you can literally see the hate of the discontent and the resentment from what his father did, and just having to go through that and see his father tell him to admit to something he didn't do. You know, he clearly said in the interview, like, I would never tell my son to admit to something he didn't do.
Yeah.
Never ever. I don't care what it cost me.
Yeah.
And I can't, and when he said it, I felt that pain because I just could not imagine my parents looking at me in the face and telling me to, like, buy in.
You better do it or else.
Yeah, like, oh, go ahead and admit to that. Something that serious. At that age, saying admit to that because if not, it will cost us.
I think if a parent does that, you pretty much destroy the fabric of the trust you have with your child.
Absolutely, of course.
I can't really go off anything you say after this point. You want me to lie, but you tell me not to lie to you. And
not even that. I mean, think about the
foundation
foundation of that. It's like, if you're my mom or my dad, your job, your sole purpose in life is to protect me, is to keep me safe. You should be the one person or the 2 people in my life that I love and I trust, and I know I can come to you with whatever, and you will lay it all out there for me. That is your job. The fact that his father put him out there and said, go ahead, go do that. I can't even imagine. And watching him say, I hate him for what he did to me, was heartbreaking. Because that's something, I mean, his father's gone now, but that is literally something he cannot get back. And at one point he said he knew his father felt guilty and it kind of depicted that in the series, that his father felt resentful for what he had done. And that he kind of stayed away from his mother and the family, you know, up until a certain amount of time passed and he got sick. But there's no excusing that.
As a parent, it's kind of hard to even fathom looking at your child in the eye after the fact, wanting them to try to carry on like everything's normal at the end of the day. And it's, as a father, it's just like, it's the worst feeling to even see a child cry. And he's staring in your face and saying, but I didn't do it, Dad. If no one believes them on this earth, that is your responsibility. And I can imagine the mental totally took on him. Like I could only imagine. I remember when I was young, my mom and dad caught me in something, and I tried to lie, or I was telling the truth, and they thought I was lying, and trying to convince them that it was the truth and not a lie.
That's like the worst feeling ever.
It's the worst feeling ever.
That's the worst feeling ever. Getting accused of something that you know for a fact you are not guilty of.
Yes.
That is like the worst feeling. Like it is crazy. And for me, especially when it gets under my skin when I know somebody's lying to me.
Yeah.
So I can't imagine knowing that my daughter is innocent and somebody accusing her of something right in front. I will go to jail.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. I would go to jail. I would go to jail. I'd be selling my couch, my furniture, like my house would be empty. We're gonna get the best, whatever my house can buy.
Yeah.
Lawyer. There would be no bounds to what I would go through to defend and protect her. None. And I think in essence, and I know we can't, like, cause we could go on and on and on and about this forever. But I think in essence, my biggest point in here is that it is so important to educate yourself on your rights, the laws, what you're entitled to. And it's not to say, go out there fighting, fuck the police, none of that.
Right.
Because, that don't get you anywhere either. But know what you're entitled to. Know what you're allowed to do, what you're not allowed to do. Know what is within your rights. And have people you can call that when and if something does happen, it's a quick, like, hey, this is what's going on and I need help.
Yeah.
Have people you love and you trust, because unfortunately, that's the world we live in right now. That is, you hear, and this is not to say, because I have cops that are my friends that are brown people and white people. And I've always said, like, don't think the fear doesn't go both ways.
Yeah.
There are white cops running around here that are damn terrified because they're patrolling and trying to protect black neighborhoods, and they're getting seen as the white cop that's here and don't belong here. So they're saying, like, they would look at it like I'm terrified because that's not my intention, but that's what it feels like because of the media coverage and how the white cop is perceived. And that is what I wouldn't want, only because what happens when you're afraid? You make stupid choices and you do stupid things.
Right.
And then you have the other side that is looking at you going, I don't know what he's going to do next, so I have to protect myself.
Thank you for shedding light on that part. But I will have to say this. It's very hard for me to believe that a random person would just pull a gun on a cop for no reason. It's just very hard for me to believe that. Unless you're...
That usually doesn't happen.
It does not normally just say, hey, there's an officer, take your gun out and shoot. Normally does not happen. Very rare.
But that is how, but you got to think about, if we and we probably shouldn't go like too deep into it just because this could be a whole nother thing, but you got to think about how the world is depicted right now, right? Is that when you show things a certain way, you start to plant this seed of hate and resentment into young people who don't know any better. And those are the moments where those things can happen, because they think they know and understand the world as it is, and they think that that is the world they live in. Like, oh, I don't like these people or this group of people because this is what they do. Instead of getting educated and understanding what's going on and being aware, and instead of taking the time to become violent and out there screaming and yelling and out there raising guns, being educated about how you can make a stand and things that you can't, that are tangible in our community to actually make a stand and really enforce and create change.
You know, the hard thing for me, and like I said, we won't get too deep into it maybe next week, but when it comes to law enforcement and the community, there's a huge disconnect, and I think we should hold the media accountable for that. Why? To your point, how are we being portrayed in the media? When people see us, and I don't see cops every day. When I do see a cop or something, there's on the TV and there's always a shooting or this and that happened or whatever have you, right? I remember growing up as a kid when we see cops in the neighborhood, it wasn't a weird thing. It wasn't, nobody was scared. We knew some of the cops by name. It wasn't a feeling of we have to be
And that's
careful.
why I said it's changed.
Right.
The idea has shifted
Right.
because of the media coverage
Right.
and how people depict a certain individual. Like, I mean, and I'm not even talking about white cops or black cops. I'm talking about in general.
Cops, period.
Cops,
But
period.
I would say this, and I'm going to cut you off. But what I wanted to say about officers is this, and I respect that profession 100% because that's a brave thing to do. When you put your vest on and your badge and your uniform on, you chose to do that job. We didn't choose to be regular people. Like, we have to be regular people. As a civilian, that's what we do every day. And so when you're knowing that, hey, I'm about to go out here and I have a potential high-risk job, you have to be mentally prepared for that. If you're a scary person and you're in fear of your life, this may not be the job for you. It's just like seeing somebody in customer service and they don't have any customer service skills at all. That's not the job for you. Because what's going to happen is, to your point, they're going to be so on high alert. Every little movement is a threat, and it's not always a threat. Sometimes people just speak loud because they just loud people.
And that's exactly what I was getting at, because I have personally done one of those simulators where it kind of depicts like something a police officer would be in. You know, like a situation with a lot of people. It's all fake, and you have a fake gun and you shoot, or you can make the choice to shoot, but it's fake. It's like laser or whatever. But you just do it basically to see how you are, like when it comes to, you know, a high pressure situation. When I thought about, they give you a scenario prior to going in, but you don't know what the scene is gonna look like. Mine was a domestic violence call. When the scene comes on, it's outside, there's a group of people, but there was a man and a woman, but there's kids around, like they're outside of a building. I was not really terrified, but you're just so anxious and on edge because you're sitting there with a gun. And even though I know, and this is me knowing it's fake, even though I know it's fake, I can see this issue going on. There are other things obviously happening in the street. People are yelling and screaming in the background about they saw him hit her and like, and she's screaming about him. It was just so much. And I was like, if this was real, I'd be killing everybody. Because
then that's not the job for you.
Obviously. But it's not to say like literally I would kill everybody. But in that moment when it's just you or just you and a partner and there's 30, 40 people standing around, that is such a high pressure situation. You don't know if they have guns. You don't know if they have a knife. You don't know when people start getting close to you. You don't know what the risk is because you can't see everything.
That's true.
And if your first instinct is to pull out a gun and start shooting, that's not the spot you need to be in, because it creates a situation where it is natural, completely natural to fend for yourself. It is the instinct of survival is 100% natural.
Right.
But if you know anything about brain function, which a lot of us don't do research on how things work up there. But if you know anything about brain function, when your body kicks into the mode of survival, you cannot think rationally about anything else but surviving in that moment. Other organs shut down, parts of your brain shut down. The only purpose in your body at that moment is, how can I save myself? How can I protect myself? And that's what we know is like fight or flight. If that's a state that you easily get into, or it's a state that you get into when you're in situations like that, which most of us do, that can be very dangerous for the public and for that officer. And I think that, to go back to what we were talking about with the Central Park case, I think that at that point in time, we were living in a society, and we still live in a society, where people go into fight or flight fearful of just unknown, of just a culture and a community of people they don't know or understand. And you look at people because they're different, or because they come from less, or because they come from a higher risk neighborhood or a different social economic standard, and you automatically think that being that different makes them different, makes them think different, makes them live different, and it doesn't.
This whole case, with it being said as, plainly as it can be, it was racially and socially driven. It was all about the fact that they were not white kids. They were black and brown young men, and to your point, the social economics where they grew up at, they was at a disadvantage. They thought it was going to be an easy open and close case, and that's what they banked on. And they was able to carry out that particular plan for some years until a kink got into the plan. And it happens so often. That's why we can't have this happen on a regular basis and let it go by. We gotta keep holding people accountable for the things they do wrong. Now, if you're a criminal, you're doing criminal activities and you get caught up, well, you gotta serve the time. But if you're a complete innocent person that they're trying to make an scapegoat, because it happens, don't get it. People believe that like the judicial system and the justice system and the police force, all of them, these are just honorable people. Like they can never do anything wrong. These people are normal people outside that badge and office. They have their own hang-ups. They have their own prejudging that they do. Some of them are racist. If you can look at a person, you have no idea.
They're just like everybody else. You have people who are cops, judges, lawyers that are awesome people and believe in what they're doing and want to do the right thing. And then you have people that are cons, and they're out here just trying to make a dollar or trying to make a case, trying to get famous, look at this lady. She went and wrote bestsellers. Like, that's what they're using that platform for. So you don't know what you're getting into until you're there and you're seeing it kind of play itself out. But to your point, it's more about being honest and being true to yourself and being true to your character. And if you're not guilty of something, say, I'm not guilty. And I hate to say, like, let the chips fall where they may, because obviously nobody wants to go to jail for something they didn't do, but don't admit to something you didn't do. I don't even know how much more we can
I think we should stop here, only because we can't go forever. And I think the whole reason we wanted to talk about this today is because we can't let this stop so far as a conversation. I'm not trying to be a dead horse. But what I'm trying to do is say, hey, now we're going into a new year, hopefully, and I'll pray, and stuff like this doesn't happen often in 2020.
Or as often, let's say.
Or as often.
And let's make it let's make it a conversation. Make it a conversation in your home. Watch the series. I know I was in a friend's house who has teenagers, and I was saying to them, like, it's something that has to be watched. It deserves for somebody to sit and watch through the whole series and really have an understanding of what happened to these men who were children at the time, where our system failed, and to highlight how we can move forward. And the things, the spots where things can be changed.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't watched it, go watch it. Please go and support those young men. I think that we should all rally together, at least show some sign of support. Follow them, like them on social media, give them words of encouragement that always help. Support Mr.
Park
Santana's.
Madison. Park Madison is a clothing line. He has his own website, and we'll include some of the links and stuff at the end.
Yeah. So once again, thank you always for watching. We appreciate you tuning in. Make sure you go and like and subscribe. Hit the little bell button down at the bottom so you can get the notifications. You can follow us on all social media platforms at Morning Coffee, or on Instagram at Morning Coffee, and on Facebook at Warren Coffee. You can also catch me on Instagram at P Hakeem.
And Mandalove.
Straight like that, man. All right, until next week, y'all stay up, and we'll see you then. Thanks.